Hi, I want to talk today about why focusing on symptoms is ultimately not really very helpful if we're looking for a cure for panic, anxiety, depression or stress. But it is a mistake that is made by tens of millions of people, including, of course, health professionals. So I have a prop today. It's this. It's the short version of the DSM-5, which is a Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association. And I just want to illustrate my point. So I'm going to just take a look at some of the symptoms for panic disorder. Now, the symptoms, of course, are your experience. And doctors and psychiatrists, whatever, they will judge whether you have a disorder from this book based upon your symptoms. So for panic disorder, okay, palpitations, pounding heart, accelerated heart rate, sweating, trembling or shaking, sensations of shortness of breath, smothering, feelings of choking, chest pain, discomfort, nausea, abdominal distress, feeling dizzy, unsteady, lightheaded, faint, chills, heat sensations, derealization, feeling of unreality, numbness or tingling, fear of losing control, going crazy. These are really stereotypical symptoms of panic. And actually, if we look at generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, which is, another different kind of anxiety disorder, restlessness or feeling keyed up, easily fatigued, difficulty concentrating, mind going blank, irritability, muscle tension, sleep disturbance. And just to kind of complete the triad, let's look at depressive disorder, depressed mood most day, feeling sad, empty, hopeless, a diminished interest or pleasure in things, weight loss or weight gain, insomnia or hypersomnia, which is more sleep than you need, feeling irritable, like you have to be on the move, psychomotor agitation, that's called, fatigue, loss of energy, worthlessness, diminished ability to think, concentrate. Right, okay, that's enough of that. These are all symptoms. Now, you are troubled by the symptoms of the problem that you have. And in this book, there are more or less 157 different disorders, and they're all defined by symptoms. And so and it's understandable why you would, if you focus on the symptoms, you're really focusing on the end of a chain of things. And what I'll suggest to you is that focusing on the symptoms does not get you anywhere at all if you're looking for a cure. The reason being is that there's a whole range of symptoms and you don't necessarily have them all at once. So symptoms are prone to change somewhat. But if you focus on the end point of a problem and don't focus on the cause of the problem, then you're kind of putting your attention in the wrong place if you want to have a different outcome. But if we want to have what we might call a cure for panic, anxiety, depression and stress, then we need to focus on the process which is creating the symptoms. Now, I had an email earlier in the week from someone who said, I like your videos on YouTube and whatnot. I'm just curious to know, how does active self-help actually work? How can it work? Okay, this brings me to, of course, the point of this video. Active self-help is about focusing on the processes, the brain processes that create the symptoms. Now, if you have a symptom of, let's say, restlessness, difficulty concentrating, constantly having to be on the move, which is common across depression, panic, and anxiety, that's the outcome, that's the symptom that you've got. Right, okay, so you're running a brain program in here which is telling you that it is not possible to be relaxed. For some reason, you have to be on edge. For some reason, you have to be kind of watchful, keeping an eye on what's going on. Okay, now, in this example, let's say, for it to make sense, you could be running a program that basically says, I feel threatened. I am threatened. Something is threatening me. I need to be on guard against something bad happening. Okay, so you're running a brain program that says, I need to be on guard. Your outcome is that you feel restless because you can't relax if your brain's telling you that you need to be on guard. And if we take that a step further, we would say anxiety is an overestimation of threat. So all anxiety disorders, generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder, are overestimations of threat, which makes sense then of why you're restless. why you have difficulty concentrating, why you feel like you need to be on the move, why you kind of got what's called psychomotor agitation with respect to depression. Okay. And for depression, the pervasive feeling of sadness, loss of pleasure and things, well, of course, that's the outcome, that's the symptom that you have. What kind of brain process might you be running that makes sense of that outcome? Well, okay, you'd be running a program which basically says something like you don't have any value, that you're a failure, that life is now meaningless. And so these kinds of brain programs make sense of your symptom. So active self-help is the process of finding out what are the processes that create the symptoms and change the process. The symptom then goes away. You will never get any progress focusing on symptoms, but if you change the process, the brain process that's creating the symptoms, bingo, you've got it done. So bringing us back to the question of how active self-help works, active self-help is the means by which we look at the process that is running in here that creates the symptom that you experience. If you focus on the symptom, all that happens is that it magnifies and it gets bigger and your problems seem more and more overwhelming. That's the power of practice at work. But when you focus on the processes, the brain processes that create the symptoms, well, then you have loads of mileage. It's the way to get a really good outcome. And it seems obvious to me, which mystifies me to some degree why tens of millions of people are encouraged to focus on the symptoms. An example would be, if you're struggling with symptoms, you go to the doctor will say, okay, let me give you something to manage the symptoms. They give you an antidepressant. That manages your symptoms to some degree. It makes not the slightest bit of difference to those processes that are creating the symptoms. That's why you will have to be on antidepressants for some number of years, let's say. I was speaking to someone the other day, they've been on antidepressants for more than 20 years. Because it does not change the process that creates the symptom, it simply makes the symptoms more tolerable. That, to my mind, is a complete and utter, well, it's not a waste of time, of course. The symptoms are more tolerable. But it also presupposes you want to have the symptoms forever. If you don't want to have the symptoms forever, you change the process. Now, one of the best things about active self-help is that I use a trans-diagnostic approach. And what this means is that panic, anxiety, depression, stress have common processes that create similar problems. So, for instance, as an example, if you struggle with anxiety, your brain will always be overestimating the threat that you're under. This is true for generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder. And if it's generalized anxiety disorder, that will take you to worry. Worry is the thinking part of anxiety. So you're running a process of worry. But you'd also run a process of worry and panic, but that's taking you to a more physiological experience. It doesn't alter the fact that you're still running an overestimation of threat. If we're talking about depression, a common process in all depressive and anxiety disorders is that you will definitely feel that you have lost emotional control. And so emotional control is a factor in all really common psychological problems that I would see, for instance. And it's a process, right? And if you feel that you've lost control, it feels like anything could happen. But once you understand and you change that process, then you feel like you're in control and you feel a lot more able to manage. And many of the symptoms associated with loss of control, such as overestimation of threat, such as worry, such as inability to control your body, such as the necessity to be tense and kind of on edge, they diminish or disappear altogether. So the active self-help approach focuses on processes that create symptoms. You change, challenge, stop the process, the symptom goes away. That is the way forward in the 21st century for mental health treatment. Focusing on symptoms simply perpetuates the symptoms. If they're medicated, it makes them a bit more tolerable, but it doesn't change the process that creates them. Therefore, active self-help is for people, well, let's say people who are interested and engaged in changing their life and becoming empowered through that process. So I hope you find this interesting. Thank you for the email, and it's propagated, I hope, a useful kind of video. All of these disorders in here, all 157 more or less of them, are all symptom based, and it's the handbook of the American Psychiatric Association. And because the American Psychiatric Association would typically be medication focused, it makes sense to define the disorder and then to medicate it, because that's the outcome that they're seeking. But from a psychological point of view, there's very little in this book that's useful, because it's all symptoms, and psychologically we're far more interested in the process that creates a symptom, because that is the thing that gets you the mileage, that gets you the progress.